As a country, we have made a lot of progress in terms of disability mainstreaming. Of course, we still have a long way to go. We know that the Kenyan Constitution confers rights to persons with disabilities. And we celebrated especially the two things in the Kenya Constitution of including Braille and also Kenya Sign Language as among the official languages. Where we are as a society, we have a long way to go and a lot of innovation is required. Coming to the education sector, we have numerous gains to celebrate over the last decade. A lot of access has expanded. We have now many more children and youth accessing educational opportunities across. Of course, the lowest access is in the early childhood sector, because we know that many parents still have to fight the stigma that comes with a child with disability getting born, and them accepting that it is normal to be different, and that anyone with disability has just as much potential as anyone else. So if we could have innovations targeting parents, targeting prenatal and young mothers, for them to access early screening, early opportunities so that children can get to school on time, that would give us tremendous progress. We have many people that are innovating around, for instance, deafness and children that are born deaf, and having early childhood opportunities for children that are born with deafness. At the primary sector, I think is where we have had the biggest gains. The movement from the segregated special schools that were the prominent in the 1980s and 1990s, and embracing the integrated school where children can attend school nearer. Of course, integration is still a journey to somewhere. It's not an end, because even within integration, there is segregation. Of course, there is that of bringing quality service nearer, even when we cannot provide all the services. But ideally, the movement is towards inclusion, because segregating the education of persons with disabilities to be educated on their own, while there are no jobs or there is no society for persons with disabilities, ideally is to have the environment changing rather than the child changing or the family changing. So having every learning institution adapting to the varied needs, not disabilities, but to anyone who just walks in with varied needs that may vary from giftedness to those with learning disabilities, but also someone who has this or the other, even perceptual disabilities. So that is very important to innovate around how we could rapidly change our schools, our institutions to look different, to embrace all the differences that there is in the human race. We have a lot of innovations happening, especially leveraging on technology disruptions, the use of devices, the movement from the braille machine to more audio software devices. All these are ways of contributing to inclusion. The movement from primary to secondary is still problematic, because we know that it is at secondary level where, for instance, children now get to encounter greater specialization in sciences, for instance, or mathematics that is more abstract that need to be adapted, or a lot of our quality schools are still boarding, meaning children have to move further from home. So that in this era of 100% transition from primary to secondary, we feel that those with special needs and disabilities have left behind. So how could we adapt that 100% transition policy by government to also figure out a better way of ensuring that also those with special needs and disabilities also transit at 100%. We know that nearly half of those that complete primary with especially severe to profound disabilities do not access secondary schooling. Yet we know that it is secondary schooling that determines more the political participation and economic inclusion of a person. So we cannot go for anything less than a secondary school completion for persons with disabilities. At secondary school, we have sciences, we have other subjects that need increasingly, adaptation. We conducted one of the analysis from examination data from KCPE and KCSE data of a period of 4 years between 2016 and 2019. And we established worrying trends of marginalization within the examination system. We find, for instance, that a person with a disability, physical or low vision or deaf or blind, has more than 20% disadvantage, even given all the examination accommodations that happen. Of course, the Kenya National Examinations Council has a lot to do in terms of expanding and re-examining the accommodations that happen for examination. Right now, we have a flat rate 30 minutes extension of time. The question is, does everyone need 30 minutes? There are those that don't even need the 30 minutes, they are okay without. And there are those that need maybe even 2 hours extension. Why wouldn't someone start an examination in the morning and take breaks? When you think about a person who has a cerebral palsy, for instance, whose muscles get very stretched and they have to rise slowly, what does 30 minutes do? It actually doesn't make any difference. So there is need to individualize accommodations by the Kenya National Examinations Council, and to have this, the examination adapted in more different ways. Why wouldn't one, for instance, take an oral examination where the answers are recorded rather than written? Why wouldn't a person who is deaf just sign the responses and a video recording of the examination is taken? Because what is knowledge about? Knowledge is not about just writing. It's about language. It's about the thought process that comes to the response. So there is a lot of space for the curriculum developers and for the examinations council to innovate. But the other thing that we find in the examinations is that even within disabilities, there's a lot of exclusion. We find, for instance, that a person who is deaf performs on average 19% lower than any other person with any other disability. So what does this mean for educating the deaf in the country? Of course, we know language is a big issue. Kenya Sign Language is not a technical language, it's a slang for communication. It is good, but now how do we move a person who speaks Kenya Sign Language to also some technical level that they are able to engage with technical materials in English language, for instance? So these inconsistencies we see are causing a lot of disadvantage, and that's why you would hardly find anyone who is deaf in any university. We would be lucky to find 2 nationally. But then what happens? What does it mean? Do we want to relate deafness to stupidity? I don't think so, and we have no evidence showing that deafness affects the cognitive capacity. What we know is that a lot of cognitive development is hindered because of lack of language development. So when you are not accessing the cognitive stimulation that comes especially in early childhood, then the brain doesn't develop. So how do we address aspects of early stimulation for children with a disability overall? Because many of them are closed within just the household. And even within the household, even if a child is, let's say, blind, because of stigma, not everyone feels free to engage them, to interact with them. So these, I think, are all spaces that require innovation if we have to achieve the dream of an inclusive society. Teachers is a big question. Do teachers know how effective education in special needs looks like? Are we able to move beyond theory to access other aspects of the affective connection that is needed? Achieving emotional balance of a person who has a disability, raising esteem and affecting the self-concept, raising problem-solving and critical thinking within disability. I know teachers know how to teach the syllabus within certain constraints, but I think even the way we train teachers and the quality of teachers has a lot to do within it. We have the teacher trainers, including the Kenya Institute of Special Education, which I chair. And at KISE, we graduate on average 1,300 teachers per year, which is a lot. And we have graduated now the teachers in the force more than 30,000 within there. But when you look at deployment, when you look at the incentive structure for the teachers, where they are posted, if you go now like to any random, let's say, school for visual impairments, you'll find that still around 30% of the teachers in there are not confident in Braille, are not proficient, Braille proficient. If you go to a random school of hearing impairments, let's say Kambui or Reverend Mohoro or the others, you find that nearly 40% of the teachers are not proficient in sign language. So what are we doing as a country to address all this? What would it take to just come up with a special program to have all teachers teaching in special schools are proficient in the basics that are needed within that? It wouldn't even take a year if we have an intensive program. So we are doing also a lot of disservice through teacher deployment. Of course, there are all these complications of the budget and the incentives that come with it. 10,000 top up on the teacher's salary. I don't know whether it's adequate or it's something else that the Teacher Service Commission needs to re-examine. I have not seen any study conducted on this, whether the 10,000 is what is needed, or whether it actually now pushes teachers who even have no passion for special needs to just go for the money. And so they end up getting the salary, but they render no service to learners with special needs. I think these are research questions that researchers within special needs at Kenyatta University or at Maseno and these other research institutions could take up. Can we get to understand what it means? What motivation is needed? What identification mechanisms are needed to have the right teacher for special needs? And what support, ongoing support, including maybe even a counseling support and all that. Because it's possible that working in a special school, for instance, yields what the psychologists call compassionate fatigue, that you need to also be accessing a counselor yourself to get support for you to remain strong rendering that service. So there is a lot of space in innovation. But let me come lastly to the whole aspect of the tertiary education. Technical and vocational education and training is one key thing, but also university. Previously, around 15 to 20 years ago, when we were at the university, anyone who was going to the university with special needs, let's say you had visual impairment, if you are called to the University of Nairobi or Moi, you are always referred to KU. And you are told, go to KU, that's where they deal with people like you. I am not sure of what changes might have happened over this time because I left the university many years ago. But getting the university to be a place that is accessible and where students with special needs can study whatever they want to study, because why wouldn't a person who has visual impairment study microbiology or the other things that they want to study, because this is happening elsewhere globally. So the movement, the opening up of the universities to embrace diversity, because if the university does not innovate to embrace diversity, where else would one get this? Then coming to the technical vocational training is a very key thing, because we know, especially for intellectual disabilities, these are not people we expect that they go to the university. In fact, we waste a lot of their time pushing them to academic education. And you find that those with mental disabilities, for instance, you get a 40-year-old person still in school. Why? Whoa, why would you be keeping a person who is 40 years old in school? But it's because there is no exit strategy, that you will enter at this level and you will move through a pre-vocational program. And then that pre-vocational program could lead to a vocational program depending on what your potential is, but pushing them so that each of them achieves their fullest potential. So technical and vocational education and training needs to also adapt to offer variety. For a long time, the only thing that you'd find people with physical disabilities and all that doing was mending shoes, um, being tailors, and so on. And these are careers that actually don't give anyone any decent income. So, in this era of technology and a lot of technological disruption that could happen to equip persons with disabilities with skills, we are expecting to see a lot at Machakos, at Sikri, and Nyangoma, and the other, and Karen Institute, for them to really invest in technology so that trainees with disabilities and youth could enjoy a wider variety of careers that they could go, but also careers that have potential for higher income. So that again, we're not through training recycling poverty in the skills that they acquire. But also the whole issue around access. We know government has done a lot. When you go now to the current institute, you find that the government is investing a lot. What there is that technology has a lot of potential to cause big disruption in what a person with disability can do. But the other barrier is at the work of the employment. Many employers still don't believe that a person with disability can work as much and can produce as much as a person without disability. We thank people like Safaricom, who are very early adopters in thinking, for instance, that persons who have visual impairments are very good in the call center, for instance, and they took and gave opportunity to many youth with visual impairments. There are certain courses that are where people who are deaf excel, beyond any imagination or of a person who has no hearing impairment. So there is need for the corporate world, for employers, I think, also to be educated. And we are glad because of innovations like this recording and pushing this material out. If every employer committed to employ one person who is looking for a job, who has the skills, who has the qualifications, then I think this really would be addressed. The other one is accessing economic opportunity. I think government has done a lot through ACPO, for instance, saying that in government procurement, there must be demonstration of offering opportunity to persons with disabilities. But when you look at what is happening, I think there is a big rift between what is desired and the reality on the ground. I have one story to tell about this person, a friend of mine who is blind. He used to beg here in Nairobi CBD for a long time. And it kept bothering me thinking about the ACPO and that this person should be supplying to government rather than begging. But then when I talked to him, I engaged him, and he had nothing. He didn't even have the card, the disability card. He had no tax exemption. he had nothing. So when we went to Huduma Center, we got somebody who helped us register him, starting with registering with the National Council so that he got a card. He had an ID, so we helped him register a business name. We helped him access KRA and get the tax exemption. We helped him open a bank account with Cooperative Bank, and he was all set. Then we went knocking doors of a few friends who work in government. And luckily, he got the first contract in one of the parastatals to supply milk and chocolate, beverages, toiletries, and the things that office requires. And all that I needed to do at a personal level was to give him a loan of 45,000 for him to do the initial supply, and before he was paid. And he was able to pay me back actually within 3 months in 3 installments of around 15,000 each. And this is now about 2 years down the line. He even had a wedding last Saturday because he has done so well in supplying, and he didn't even have to be the one doing it. This parastatal is near Kibera, so all we needed to do was to go to Kibera, identify a big shop that has good stock, connect him, and then that shop has a rider who supplies. So again, we connected. So the three of them, him and the shopkeeper and the rider, now form the team. So all he needed is to call when he's called from that parastatal. He has a list of what needs to be supplied. He calls the shopkeeper packs, gives the rider delivers, and he pays the rider through M-Pesa and pays the shopkeeper through M-Pesa. So as we speak now, he even went back home country, built a house. He just operates from there, calling, and now you should just see him walking around the village in high esteem. He's a businessman. And he has accessed now also others. The last time we spoke, I think he told me he had saved around 300,000. And he was thinking about how to diversify. So that movement from begging on Uhuru Highway to being a supplier just needed some little connection. And this has led me to thinking about how we could innovate more. And at KISE, I have brought the idea of establishing a special center called Disability Enterprise Support Center, where now these connections can be done. We are employing a young person who will be going to the streets and talking to those people who are doing little things that will never add up, to give them a livelihood, bring them to KISE. We establish a center where they are trained, first of all. And this guy, this businessman, can be a model for them to come and give them, hands-on experience. And those that want to proceed on this journey are facilitated, in connection to Huduma Center to register a business, to do this and this and that. And then once we have a list of those that are qualified suppliers, we have already some money that could establish a revolving kind of a fund. And as they become more and more, we can even lead to them forming a circle, so that this revolving fund would go to the circle, so that they now be taking loans from the circle, and that would make itself a self-oiling machine where they are the ones in charge. I think there is a lot of space to innovate, to affect as many people with disabilities as possible in connecting to economic opportunity and achieving an inclusive society for all.